Hello, this is Gareth Jones on Speed, episode 384. Amongst the many things we'll be discussing in this episode today will be the Le Mans 24 Hours. And if you'd like to attend this year's race and camp at the same campsite we're using, you can, thanks to our sponsors, Team Langoustine. If you'd like to know more, please go to garethjones.tv/Le Mans. Or stick around, there'll be more info a little bit later in the show.
The first F1 testing session of 2020 has drawn to a close, and I'm here with a representative from one of the teams. Tell me, how has testing been for you?
Well, we were very pleased with how things went. We started strongly, a few slow moments on the second day, of course. But overall, delighted with all the feedback. Really good to clock up some numbers, and all the stats are pretty much in line with what we would have hoped to see.
So, the car is going well?
Oh, I don't know about the car. I just do our social media. Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed. She's Sarah.
Hello.
I'm Gareth, and he's slightly under the weather, aren't you, Richard? You're right, love.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Will you survive the length of this programme?
It's doubtful.
Okay.
At the moment, but we'll see.
We'll have a fast ambulance standing by just in case we have to whip you off to that hospital on the Wirral where they're keeping everyone who's ill at the moment. You haven't got that, have you?
Well, who knows? No, I don't. No, it's just a cold. I just have a cold.
Okay, good. Phew. Because I bet that's sort of on everyone's mind, isn't it? How are you? Oh, I'm not very well. Oh, and step away.
Yeah, don't give it to me.
Yeah. Sarah, you're fitting well.
I'm well, thank you.
Good.
Yes.
And have you been watching the F1 testing this week, or keeping up with it?
Yes, I have. I did catch a glimpse of it. I didn't watch every second, but I have a general gist of what's been going on.
Yeah, it's been intriguing. Have you caught any of it? Have you got Sky at the moment, Richard? Have you got a subscription?
We do have Sky, yeah, but I haven't been watching any of it. It passed me by. I was just looking on the internet and stuff. So I saw about the Mercedes
Dual axis
reach rake steering column adjuster.
DAS, that's what it is. It's just so he get comfortable in the car. He can move his column forward and backwards.
You know.
That's what it's doing.
You could get that on the Vauxhall Carlton years ago. It's America. Formula One's only just catching up. But apparently it also moves the front wheels, so...
Yeah. They call it DAS, dual axis steering. It does two things. Apart from steering both wheels left or right, if you pull the column or push the column, it changes the toe in. Now, normally F1 cars are set up with a little bit of toe out, which I was surprised about, actually. I thought it'd be toe in, but it's a bit of toe out. And then when they get to a straight, if you pull the steering column back, it reduces that toe out, so the two wheels are now absolutely parallel, and apparently that gives you an advantage in terms of less scrub on the inside of the tyre. There's a bit of an aerodynamic advantage, and apparently, and I'm not sure how this is achieved, but apparently in going from toe out to square on, you get a minor but discernible ride height difference as well. So it helps you aerodynamically in that way. Plus, of course, if you've got the tyre square on to the airflow, you've got a more aerodynamically efficient shape, so there are proper aerodynamic advantages. Did you follow all this, Sarah?
Yeah, I did read up on it. Apparently James Allen from Mercedes was jumping around the paddock quite tickled pink with himself. Quite chuffed that he
James
was
Allison, isn't it?
James Allison, wrong.
James Allen was
James
that man
Allen's
with
the other one,
slightly
sorry.
annoying voice. He used to commentate.
You
on-
love him, don't you?
Yeah. I don't actually.
James
Do you know what? His written
Allison,
stuff is good. I don't have an objection with that. I just don't want to hear him speak.
But James Allison, you're right,
James
would have
Allison,
been
yeah.
very excited, because when you are the toppermost of the poppermost, as Mercedes are, they've got nowhere to go. We've said it before, you can only fail. So to come up with something that is experimental, that appears to be working, because Mercedes have been quick. Have you spotted the times, Richard, at all?
They're miles ahead, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're traditionally not. I don't know whether they sandbag, but they certainly don't push it, do they, in testing? They just tend to sort of go for the reliability factor. You just drank from my glass. Now, I have the coronavirus, so now you're in trouble.
I made the mistake. I thought that was my grapefruit-infused IPA, but it is in fact your Ribena, Richard, and now I've got your illness. Sorry about
Your
that.
beer is over there.
My beer. I'll get the beer. The beer will cure it.
No, trust me, I've tried that one. Tried it on Friday night, didn't work.
Well, I did read that Ferrari had been struggling this week, but apparently they just want to get the car right this week, but next week they're going to focus on actual performance.
We say this every year, don't we? We always get excited by testing. But they're all running a programme, aren't they? First of all, in the first day, the first week, they're just making sure that they've got all the right bits in the right place in the car and it actually rolls. It's seldom worth trying to work out who's got the edge, and we've been foxed in the past. Do you remember last year we said, oh yes, the Alfa Romeo is going to be the third quickest car? I think we said last year.
Well, here's a little fast fact. Ferrari set the fastest lap times in testing from 2016 to 19, but Mercedes won the drivers' and constructors' titles all those years. No, it's pretty obvious stat. But,
no, it's useful to have a flashback at how we saw it.
I think the winners of the week, though, were Williams, because they actually got their car on the track this year. So last year the car didn't even make the track, so I think they're quietly excited that they were able to achieve that. And I think their car was first out on track, no?
I think maybe you're right, yeah. And
first team on the track.
But it doesn't look half bad. Have you seen it, Richard, in the new colours?
Yeah, that's all right, isn't it?
I like their
Livery, yeah, livery. Do you care about Williams, Richard? We used to, didn't we?
Yeah, I suppose I do, yes.
They did quite well.
To answer your question. No, I know, it's a bit sad, isn't it? It's sad when compared to, I don't know, Haas or someone where you just go, okay, they're quite like their plucky outsider thing, but it's like they've never won a championship, so there's no sort of humiliation in them being whereas Williams, they're a championship winning team, and now they're not even close. It's just, I don't know, it's like a sort of loss of dignity from that. You feel sorry for them a little bit.
Well, it's the massive loss of dignity. It's like you say, they've not just fallen off the top three, they have the slowest Formula One team. That includes newcomers like Haas and poorly funded teams like Racing Point. How can that be possible? Are they being held back by their heritage is the question. Is the fact that they've won so well in the past and haven't reinvented themselves like McLaren have. McLaren perhaps have realised what their flaws are.
I don't know. I was puzzled as to how sort of a culture within a company can kind of go into a downward spiral, because it happens in road car makers as well. I don't know whether it's like a change of management or it's just that people kind of lose their way or whatever. You just don't know, do you, until you work there. But you can just completely lose direction.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether also it's psychological. You just suddenly get landed with a CAC engine one season. Everything just kind of follows in that wake where the engine's bad and then everyone just loses their enthusiasm and starts doing a worse job. Yeah. I don't know.
That's a good question. I wonder then if the question is, when did it go wrong for Williams, or was it when Renault pulled out of Formula One, whenever that was, and they had to use Supertech engines, which were Mechachrome built ex-Renault engines without the support, and they painted their car red, and that was like heresy, wasn't it, for Williams? They've always been blue. And did they ever really recover from that? They had a period where they first went to Mercedes engines, and Pat, what's his name from what was Benetton, was their engineer for a while, where they produced a couple of cars over a couple of years that were really good. And that's how we noticed Valtteri Bottas was so good. And he got picked out for Mercedes. But that defied the trend. The trend has been horrific, hasn't it? Poor Williams.
Yeah, but then did they have some bad years between... I'm trying to think now.
They had some Cosworth years.
I think didn't they? They were right up there just under Red Bull that 4 years ago.
Well, yeah, that's right. That was the not Pat Fry, what's his name?
Pat Simmons.
Pat Simmons, thank you. That was the Pat Simmons year.
Era, but also budget's probably had a bit to do with it as well.
Yeah.
Budget isn't as big.
They had sponsorship from Rexona and Martini.
I suppose if you just lost a big sponsor and you're still a good team, then suddenly you've got to stop spending so much money, and that's the start of a decline. I don't know. But then you do see teams that are quite well funded declining. I mean,
McLaren.
Well, yeah, Ferrari.
Ferrari. They're really
reasonable budgets, and they've had some iffy times, haven't they? And it took Ross Brawn and Michael Schumacher sort of double act of excellence and pull everyone up by their bootstraps a bit.
Well, that was a great example of utter reinvention, wasn't it? They basically, forgive me for saying basically, but they essentially bought the Benetton team, didn't they, and imported all the skills from there to take care of what was Barnard's Ferrari up to then, wasn't it? John Barnard had been designing cars and using even a British base, and that wasn't working out. They managed to reinvent themselves. Yeah, Williams need to do that, don't they? An absolute forget everything you know, start from scratch sort of policy. Anyway, we've gone slightly off topic. Let's get back to the other end of the grid. Actually, to be fair, Williams perhaps aren't. Well, we don't know yet. Hopefully they're not the back of the grid team.
Where were they?
Well, actually, the other thing that happened in testing was a surprise team was Racing Point. They drew a lot of attention because apparently they've copied the Mercedes car and some of their technologies. Sergio Perez was second fastest on one of the days.
Again, this is testing. Let's not read too much into it. But you're right about copying. But more than copying, I believe Racing Point, or Aston Martin as they're going to be next year, have exploited every aspect of the rules which allows them to use what they call non-listed parts. Is that right? So they've used as many things that they're allowed to use by buying in from Mercedes. I think their gearbox and their rear suspension and the engine now, I say engine, the power unit, including the energy recovery, all that is off-the-shelf Mercedes stuff, I believe, now, rather than trying to make it work of their own validation. So that is going to help. And if you look at the nose of the car, it's got that sort of Gary tennis bat thing on the end of the tip of the nose. That's exactly like last year's W10, was it, the Mercedes? So you're right, they're clearly showing influence. We wish them well. I want every team to do well.
Well, I want to shake a few things up.
Yeah. The Mercedes, the thing that I'm most excited about, is it the W11? This idea, this revolutionary idea of being able to change the toe angle on the front wheels. For me, that's what innovation in Formula One is all about. You know, I've said this on the programme before. The year when Tyrrell came out with a 6-wheel car, or Brabham put a fan on the back of the car, or who was it, Dan Gurney, who first put wings on cars. Those step changes to what we do with our cars, that's what makes F1 exciting from a technological, innovative point of view for me. And I've said it before, it's the only sport I'm really interested in is motorsport. It's full of technology. I like technology rather than sport. However, this is only going to be one season, this DAS, isn't it? Dual axis steering. Because as of next year, it's banned. What do you think of that, gang?
Well, I don't know. I wonder how effective it is. They must presumably think it's worth it. But
So, yeah, it's not quite an investment if they can't use it long term, but they could win.
It feels like you could just sort of lock it off. So it's not like the 6-wheel Tyrrell, for example, which is a sort of fundamental change in design philosophy, or for that matter, the fan car, which was so sort of, I don't know, they sort of had to stop using that. But, you know, this is almost like a little bit of trimming. It's an extra little garnish on top. It turned out it was illegal, which they were very ballsy about. You see, they were sort of going, we're confident this is within the rules. And it seems like it is. They'll just make sure it's not within the rules next year. But if it had been found against the rules, well, they just sort of, I presume the rest of the car works fine if they just stop that bit working. So it's more like it's a little bit of extra garnish, just a little trick. But you're right, I do quite like it when they find loopholes like that. It shows how hard they're working.
It is quite clever. Actually, I saw Daniel Ricciardo get interviewed about it, and he said, you know, hats off to Mercedes. This is exactly why they are the top team, because they're constantly pushing the boundaries and coming up and, working really hard behind the scenes.
You know what else they've done this year on their car? They've found a way of allowing the power unit, or I'd say engine, the power unit on that Mercedes to operate at higher temperatures than it did before. And the function of this is they can have smaller radiators. Smaller radiators, you have less aerodynamic drag, you've got a more efficient car. The detail work, they finally moved the position of their impact intrusion things at the side as well, which has given them an even more sculptured car. They've taken nothing for granted, have they? That they had the best car, arguably the second best car last year. It was said that the Ferrari was better. But they've taken one of the top two cars and absolutely worked on it for the benefits of only one season. That's commitment, isn't it? Because next year's car, you're starting from scratch, aren't you?
It's an indicator of a team that really knows what it's doing with the basics. They're not having to scratch their heads and go, why doesn't the aero work properly, like some of the other teams are? Why is the chassis not good at low speed corners? It's all nailed down. So if you're kind of absolved of having to worry about the basics, you can start to think a little bit more laterally, I suppose. I don't know how. I'm just assuming that. I don't know how Formula One teams work in that respect. I'm sure a Mercedes engineer listening to this would go, it's not that simple, mate. It's still really hard to make the car work properly. But they do know what they're doing, don't they? And the cars this year aren't that different to last year's, are they? So in as much as next year's...
There's no change at all. The tyres are the same, the spec of the car's the same. But I think you've got a point. They must have a confidence confidence that they've produced a consistently good car for so long now that they know that their wind tunnel and their 7-point dynamics rig gives them good data. So whatever they get in theory, they're actually delivering on the track, and that allows them to do a bit of blue skies thinking, and I'm going to make those quotation marks with my fingers. They allow themselves to come up with slightly radical ideas, slightly bonkers ideas. But there are other benefits, apparently, with the DAS, the dual-axis steering. By reducing the scrub on the tyres on the straights, it reduces the temperature in the tyres. And tyre... what's the word? Not maintenance. I'm thinking of tyre care. Taking care of your tyres over the race is one of the governing things in F1 at the moment, and they're getting on top of that by altering this. So the benefits on benefits. It reduces the heat soak that goes into the axle and the brakes and then everything else. But I was looking at some pictures of the kind of level of detail that F1 teams are going to in terms of keeping their wheels cool. Have you seen? They're hollowing out the spokes now. Did you know that on the wheels? The wheels on the magnesium, they're hollow. That's beautiful. I didn't know they were doing that last year.
Is that a new thing?
I know Mercedes increased the surface area of their wheels by drilling holes in it and giving these sort of dimples. But now they're actually hollowing out the spokes as well. And that's fantastic.
Weirdly, I was driving the Lexus ES. Have you seen that? Sort of medium-sized saloon car that
Yes.
very quietly came out with last year, I think.
Front-wheel drive. Yeah.
And with one of the things they, again, I was going to say boast about, that makes it sound like they're making noise. It's not. It's one of the most sort of understated cars. But if you read the bump, there's a bit about how they reduced road noise by making the alloy wheels hollow, which is uncommon in road cars. But the part of the way that it reduces noise is because it turns the road noise into heat through these resonator holes. Now, I'm not sure how that works.
Wow.
It feels like that's the opposite of what F1 are trying to do, because they don't care about noise. They just want less heat, don't they? So
Turn it into heat. Well, only vibration, which is the essence of noise, will generate heat. So if it's heating the air and using the hollow spokes to channel that heat away, it's going to generate more noise because it's now a hollow resonating chamber. I think they're selling us nonsense.
Well, I buy the idea that you could turn one energy into another energy that you don't mind having, but I don't know how they do it. It was a very quiet car, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they're famously quiet.
Very quiet car, so maybe there's something in it. Yeah, it's the only car I've driven that I'm aware of where if you have the wipers on and you stop and it detects the passenger door is opened, it stops the wipers so that the person getting out doesn't get splashed.
Nice idea.
It's really thoughtful, isn't it?
I like the detail.
F1 cars with that.
I remember interviewing one of Toyota's head engineers, and he was telling me about how on the Yaris Hybrid, in order to keep the weight down, because it's such a little car, they were now using aluminium rotor wire instead of copper on the electric element of the motor. And something in the battery as well was using aluminium. I mean, they were only making tiny gains, but this was really important to them, you know.
Does aluminium conduct?
Yeah, well, they've got it in a Lexus electric motor or a Toyota electric motor, so yeah. It's a metal. It'll conduct, probably not as efficiently as
not
copper.
as well, though. That's the reason they use copper, isn't it?
So they have to use twice as much. Oh, yeah. It's heavier than it was in the first place. So, who knows?
F1, they're putting holes in the wheels. Is something beeping in here?
Yes, it's the dryer. My children's underpants for tomorrow are being dried, and the rest of their clothes.
My head was beeping. Yeah, they're putting holes in the wheels to dissipate heat. That's the gist of it.
If you increase the surface area by drilling holes and giving it dimples, then that surface area will cool in the wind more quickly. And if you've got holes in it, channels in it, you can use... Because, you know, if you've got a... Sounds like how now, but if you've got a straw and you blow over the open end of a straw, whilst dipping the other end in the water, it will suck up the water because you create an area of low pressure and spray it. That's basically the principle on which a Humbrol spray gun works. And that's what they're doing. They're using these sort of pipes. If wind blows across the top of the pipe, it draws the hot air out from where it's hot.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I knew how would be useful. You don't know what how is, Sarah, do you? Not a clue. You weren't here for that. It was a kids' telly show I did for a long time. Kids' science show. I thought you were looking a bit, what's he talking about?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, other stuff in F1 very briefly that we're interested or exciting about. There is a new team. No, there isn't. There's an old team with a new name. How do we say it? Talking about how. Now, is it Alpha Tauri or is it Alpha Tauri? What would you say, Richard?
I would probably say Alpha Tauri because it looks like it's Taurus, but as in bull. Which is what they're
Star sign, Taurus.
Yeah.
I would say AlphaTauri, but I did see Pierre Gasly be interviewed during the week, and they asked him, how do you pronounce it? And he just said it would just depend on your accent. So I'm Australian, the way I pronounce my vowels might be AlphaTauri, but he might say something a bit more fancy.
Who knows? Alpha Tauri.
AlphaTauri.
Tauri.
AlphaTauri.
They are Italian,
He probably
Alpha
said
Tauri. But it doesn't matter.
Are they Scuderia as well?
Scuderia Alpha Tauri, I think they are, because they were
Scuderia Alpha.
Scuderia Toro Rosso, STR, weren't they? That's why the car was the STR,
So,
whatever
yeah,
it
that
was.
might be the Italian way of pronouncing it.
Yeah.
They've done this for why?
To promote a clothing brand. Apparently, Red Bull, who have diversified into all sorts of things apart from just liquid that tastes like medicine, they have a clothing brand now called Alpha Tauri. Because if you think about it, Toro Rosso meant nothing. It was just a passable translation of Red Bull into a Latinate language. So they missed out. They weren't promoting Red Bull anymore because it's not called Toro Rosso in Italy. It's called Red Bull all over the world. So they missed out on an opportunity. And now to give it an Italian identity, Alpha Tauri, sounds like Alfa Romeo as well. You know, it's kind of a good name.
But that is unfortunate, isn't it? Because that means it then sounds like another team on the grid.
That's the downside.
Explain to me the Italian connection of AlphaTauri, because Red Bull is not an Italian.
It isn't, but what was the Toro Rosso team were Minardi, who were an Italian team,
Right,
you see.
there you go.
Yeah, based
good.
in Italy. They're based in, it's not Modena, where's, Faenza, isn't it? That's the Toro Rosso headquarters, Faenza. So I'm not sure where that is in Italy, but certainly in Italy.
I was just looking at their clothes. Oh, the logo of the clothes is exactly like the car. Like it's got the Red Bull sort of charging bull.
Yeah.
Built into it. Discover innovative spring jackets. All right.
Oh, I love an innovative jacket, don't you? I'm so fed up my clothes not being
Put one over
innovative.
your legs. Oh, crikey. Quite expensive.
Yeah, it's upmarket stuff.
530 quid for a big coat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's close. I'm surprised.
You're not going to be bothering with any of that then,
I don't
Richard?
know. I mean, it looks all right, but I wouldn't. It's weird, isn't it? Oh, look at this Torex. What's Torex?
That's a fabric they've invented, probably.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of expensive coats again.
It's probably...
Probably wouldn't pay 400 quid for that coat, but anyway. Well, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I wonder if that'll work. Because the problem is, it's all well and good going where we're advertising it on our Formula 1 team, but people go, sorry, what is that? Like, they've got to make the point that it is a clothing. I didn't know.
Well, that's the purpose. That's the purpose of Formula One. It's not to advertise brands that you know about, but to bring new brands or brands that are known in one territory to the world. That's the whole function. It's what you can do with an international sport that you can't do with a national sport. I mean, we didn't know what map-free was until 2 years ago.
And of course, everyone's drinking rich energy these days, aren't they? So.
Great news, Claire. We have 2 potential title sponsors for Williams this season.
2? Well, that's fantastic. Who are they?
Well, the first is COVID-19,
I'm sorry, what?
the coronavirus.
I don't understand.
It seems that the virus has mutated to such an extent now that it has its own marketing department. Their offer really was quite generous.
But it's a potentially lethal condition. It's bringing the world to its knees.
Yeah, there is that.
I mean, we'd look like desperate idiots aligning our team with something like that.
Yeah, I fear so.
So, who's the other offer from?
It's Rich Energy.
Call the virus back. Say it's a yes.
Step Central! With Gareth Jones on speed!
How would you like to join the Gareth Jones on Speed team at the 2020 Le Mans 24 Hours? This year we'll be at the race and staying at the Team Langoustine campsite. It's located at the heart of the circuit at Tetre Rouge, a secure, gated site with everything you'll need. Clean toilets, hot showers, hot food, a bar and friendly staff.
Why not join us there and perhaps even spend some quality time with us before and after the race at the campsite, and maybe even appear on one of the episodes of On Speed recorded over the weekend. Packages start from as little as £235. For more information, go to garethjones.tv/Le Mans. Go on, come and enjoy the greatest race in the world at a truly terrific campsite. Places are limited, so book now at garethjones.tv/Le Mans.
At the precise moment we're recording this episode of Gareth Jones on Speed, there's a race on in the Circuit of America, part of the WEC, World Endurance Championship, and I watched the start. I was very pleased to see the Rebellion team tear away with their single car from the only other two cars in LMP1 category, the Toyota TS050s, and it made me consider the future of endurance racing, and I'm not sure it's as happy as we've been told it is recently. Sarah, you've got the press release there about the recent changes to the regulations to allow the, what do we call it, the LMDH class.
It will allow cars from the IMSA Sports Car Championship, which is the American Championship, to race in the World Endurance Championship, the WEC Championship. So it's the first step towards common rules across both series, which means it might become a huge global World Series. Not like the Baseball World Series, which actually is not an actual World Series. That's just in America. The world according to America in baseball.
Well, true fact, the World Series in baseball is called the World Series because when it was started, or early in its life, it was sponsored by the World newspaper.
Is that right?
That is so interesting.
They just kept the name in the same way that, I don't know, people can't help calling it the Brit Awards, which I think was the Britannia Music Club, wasn't it?
It was the BPI Awards, British Phonographic Institute, and they rebranded Brit.
Yeah, the World Series is because there was a newspaper called The World. They used to sponsor it, and then when the newspaper was long gone, but they just kept the name, and people always go, "Oh, Americans stupid."
It is the ongoing joke that the world series, according to America is they think America is the actual world.
I'm actually going to rename this show the world's most popular podcast, Gareth Jones on Speed. That's actually the name of the podcast. That means people will think it's the world's most popular podcast. It's worked for America. It worked for us. I'm reminded of a sketch where a bloke goes into a dry cleaners and says, "What are dry cleaners?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, I'll put my trousers in. I'll pick them up, at 2 o'clock? No, sir, they'll be ready tomorrow." "But it says 1 hour dry cleaners." No, sir, that's just the name of the shop. We clean in 24 hours. It's just the shop, it's called that. It's a bit like that, isn't it? Anyway, sorry, we've gone off topic. The WEC, the World Endurance Championship, incorporating IMSA. We thought it was going to be all very happy and exciting because the hypercars, or if you're French, hypercar class was announced a year or so ago, and it appeared that we were going to get some really exotic machinery right at the front of the grid. Fantastic. And then there would be LMP2 and there would be the GT classes. However, since they announced the LMDH class, which is Le Mans Daytona prototype with a hybrid class, it's become a threat to hypercar, because what they're trying to do, as I understand it, is create a class of car that will compete against the hypercars in the same combined class. So you won't have LMP1 and LMP2 anymore at Le Mans. You'll have one class. It's two types of cars competing directly against each other. And I wonder how that's going to work out, because there'll still be, we won the hypercars and we won the LMDH. People will always separate it. But as far as I understand, the LMDH is what they call the Daytona Prototype 2.0. So it's a stock chassis, rather like the LMP2 chassis, which will be built by 4 manufacturers who are Ligier, Dallara, Multimatic and Orica, right? So you buy your chassis and you also get a stock hybrid system which works on the rear axle, but you can put your own engine in it and you can style the bodywork to look like your car. Now, this is working very successfully in IMSA at the moment. For instance, Mazda. Have you seen the Mazda Daytona prototype, Richard? It's pretty, and it looks like a Mazda. It's got some Mazda qualities, and it's run by the Yost team, who used to run the Audis very successfully at Le Mans, and they're taking on Cadillac, which is again the same chassis with some styling that looks like Cadillac and a Cadillac engine. So it's enabling manufacturers to join in a international sports car championship at almost the highest level relatively cheaply. But there are those who won't do this, namely Ferrari and McLaren. And one of the ideas of the hypercar class was to attract McLaren and Ferrari into making cars that would compete at Le Mans, to make Le Mans even more attractive. Now, Ferrari said, yes, we would compete in the Daytona LMDH class if we can build our own chassis. Well, no, that's not the idea. You've got to use a stock chassis. Well, we won't compete then. We won't put a Ferrari engine in someone else's chassis because we are Ferrari. And McLaren, who made a lot of noise about, yeah, we want hypercars. We want a car that looks like things that we can sell and we'll join. And then they announce the hypercar rules and McLaren go, nah. Sorry, no. We're going to go and badger Dallara and race at IndyCar instead. And Aston Martin, this is the big gut punch to the belly. Who Aston Martin this last week announced that they're putting their hypercar programme, they say they're postponing it, putting it on ice. Now, putting 3 and 12 together, I figured it was because Aston Martin are now going into Formula One. But not so, apparently. It's because of the introduction of the LMDH class. Because Aston Martin apparently were counting on racing a few of their own Aston Martin Valkyries at Le Mans, but then selling these chassis, because they're, $2.5 million each, to other people to compete with. Now, these other people are going, I'm not spending $2.5 million on a Aston Martin chassis when I can buy an off-the-shelf LMDH chassis and compete against you on equal terms. So they've absolutely knackered it themselves. This whole deal that IMSA were trying to put together with WEC to introduce more brands and more cars has absolutely scuppered hypercar. What's the motoring equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot? They've run over their own mechanics' toes.
Yeah, devil's advocate.
Yeah.
By combining with the North American series, expanding their audience, if it works, it'll make it a much more tempting prospect for McLaren, Aston Martin, people like that to come in because they'll be reaching a bigger audience, if it works.
Yeah.
So they might not have shot themselves in the foot. Also, don't buy that about Aston Martin. The reason Aston Martin are reining it all in is because they're financially screwed. That's why.
Yeah.
And Lance, what's his name? Lawrence Stroll can't keep bailing them out. So, yeah.
Well, it was David King, who is Aston Martin Racing president, who very deliberately made the announcement this last week that no, nothing to do with financial worries of the car company, nothing to do with Formula One, it's all to do with we can't afford to go racing because we can't sell the chassis. That's the same thing, isn't it?
Well,
it's a spin.
They can't, I'm sure it's a little from column A and a little from column B, but, they're reportedly how squeaky it got before Lawrence Stroll wrote the first of the large cheques to them,
How squeaky do you know? You seem like you're hinting on something that you know about.
No, I don't know anything for a fact. But if you sign a deal with someone and then you've got to ask them for an extra, what was it, like 50 million quid or something, as a bit of an advance, you're probably quite close to that point where you can't pay people's wages, aren't you? So I would guess that's pure guesswork, but it doesn't look good, does it, from a distance? One
of the chaps I know who worked at Aston Martin's PR department doesn't seem to be there anymore. He's working elsewhere. I wonder if they're making savings at Aston Martin.
I know who you mean.
Yeah.
I don't know why that happened.
Yeah. Who knows? I'm just guessing, trying to read between the lines here.
I've got here the earliest it's likely to happen.
The earliest what's likely to happen?
Well, the earliest it is likely to happen to have one set of rules for both series is going to be 2025.
Oh, really? I thought it was nearer than that.
After the initial 5-year commitment to the LM hypercar class that kicks off this September.
Yeah.
At the beginning of 2021 wet campaign.
Well, it kicks off officially this September. See, Le Mans is the final race in the 2019-2020 calendar. Then the 2020-21 calendar is the start of the new category with hypercars. And apparently, at the moment, the only manufacturer officially is Toyota. who said they fudged it, didn't they? They made an announcement recently saying, we're reevaluating. Then they came out and said recently, no, we're definitely going to carry on. We're too far down the line. We've invested in this GR Super Sport, is that what it's called? Their car, this road-going car that was going to race in the hypercar class. But who are they going to race against? At the moment, it's not Aston Martin, unless Aston Martin change their mind radically in the next 3 months. I can't see that happening. It's not going to be Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus, who say that they're going to be in hypercars, but not for 2 years. It's going to be against Bicollis. Now, Bicollis. Okay, I admire the fact that they've managed to keep going in LMP1 for I don't know how many years. But if I'm being blunt, they are a shit team with a pathetic car that barely finishes most of the races against Toyota, who've won Le Mans twice now. It's not a fair match, is it? So, what are they going to do? I reckon they're going to grandfather LMP1 cars, where they will find a way of using balance of technology, balance of performance to keep the existing non-hybrid LMP1 cars in the race. Now, that doesn't mean Rebellion, because Rebellion announced that they're leaving motorsport altogether after Le Mans. I'm going to sit down. That's heartbreaking.
Why are they doing that? Are they opening a patisserie or something?
It's a good question. Why are they doing that? Well, someone made a good point to me. They wrote to me on Twitter and said, I'm not surprised Rebellion are doing that because I've no idea what it is they're actually about. And it's their watches. Rebellion make watches. Big, fantastic Swiss watches. But most people don't know that. They're just a team, what was the Speedy Team Seba, an amalgamation of two teams, a British team and a Swiss team, who came under the Rebellion brand and raced fantastically with Lola chassis and Orica chassis. They competed against the big guys, and now they're just walking away. And it's a shame because they're the most successful independent team in LMP1, non-manufacturer team. And Le Mans the ACO worked really hard over the last few years to keep other teams in LMP1 when Porsche and Audi and Nissan all left. Heartbreaking. I'm devastated because I was looking forward to seeing that Valkyrie race against the GR Super Sports and this alleged Peugeot Rebellion alliance. But apparently, Peugeot getting together with Ligier, but that's still 2 years away. Okay. So maybe Hypercars is coming, but I'm concerned that it's just going to get ridden over and there'll all be these LMDH. I've really gone into one here, haven't I? I've been ranting for 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
It's a very passionate topic for you.
Yeah, it truly is. Because I go there every year. I feel invested and involved in it. And I love the Rebellion team who've been good to us as a programme in the past. Do you have
a highlight of their
Rebellion?
Yeah, tell me about a highlight.
They came third, was it, 2 years ago? They won in the non-hybrid LMP1 class back in 2014, I think. Noljani, who I used to know in A1GP, made his name with that team. All their cars have looked great. People I know have worked for that team. So just having access to their garage was a highlight for me. I feel personally involved. And also, celebrating with them. When was that? 3-4 years ago? We were with them. We were partying with them in the paddock. We made a little film about it with Damien Sung for the show. That was hilarious. And we had Nelson Piquet Jr. driving for them. It was lovely getting smashed with them. That was my personal highlight. And I'm sad.
Time he's got smashed.
Oh, hey now! Hey! So there we go. That's me sad about the future of Le Mans. It's not as healthy as I was hoping it was going to be. However, Aston Martin said they're going to carry on in GTE, the two GT categories.
Yeah.
So there's hope down there because we like that.
Yeah. I mean, what's to stop them if they're really desperate to get these car makers in? It won't use a generic or a off-the-shelf chassis. Just go, okay, fine. Knock yourself out.
Well,
duplicate all the effort.
Aston Martin have done this before. Do you remember a few years ago? You were there when they raced in the LMP1 category.
Oh, that absolutely bog-awful thing with a straight six.
Before they did that, they ran a Lola with an Aston Martin engine and rebadged it Aston Martin, much to the chagrin of Lola. They've got history doing that. I remember when Dave Richards made the announcement at Le Mans after the race, next year will be an LMP1. Everyone went, what? And they turned up with this Lola rebadged Aston Martin with a big V12 Aston Martin engine in the back, and it was great. So they've got history having done that before. So my prediction is that, hypercar is gone as far as Aston Martin are concerned. We may get 2 years of something like hypercar before everyone says, bollocks to this, I'm just going to run these stock chassis at Le Mans. It's cheaper. But you know what I blame for all this? It's not the ACO, it's not IMSA with their Unity, it's Formula E. Because look at all the manufacturers who have left the WEC or Le Mans recently. Nissan, Porsche, Audi, where are they? Formula E. There's only so much money that can go around. They had to be in Formula E because that is, doing inverted commas with my fingers, the future.
Well,
and it's cost endurance racing.
It's
furious.
almost as if motor racing is all just about marketing. Shh. Except actually it's not, because I just had a software update on my Jag I-Pace, and as a direct result of not Formula E itself, although supposedly they learned some stuff from that, but from the comedically slow support race with I-Pace racing cars, they've realised they can use a little bit more of the battery.
You get more range
So
then?
I've got more range.
Fantastic. How much more, do you know?
I don't know if there's an actual percentage on it. They are using, those batteries always have a top and a tail that they don't use to protect the life of the battery.
Yeah.
They've realised they can eat into a bit more of that, and
Cool.
it won't damage the batteries because the racing cars do it under extreme stress.
Cool.
So I think it's another sort of like 7% capacity or something like that.
That's handy when you've got a range of, 200 miles in your car, thereabouts? So 7%,
No, it was sort of
another
200
14
and a bit.
miles.
It's constantly showing over 250 now when you charge it up.
Right.
And it wasn't doing that before.
So you got another 20 miles or so. Fantastic.
Something like that, yeah.
Fantastic.
More if you put it in eco mode as well, because they recalibrated that so it doesn't use both motors so much in eco mode.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
It's a lot of that's come from the race programme.
Take it back. I don't hate Formula E
So-
anymore. I don't hate Formula E. I honestly don't. I'm just saying that there's not enough money to go around for Formula E, WEC and F1. That's all I'm saying. Hey, listen, can we talk about something else equally sad? And I know both of you will be a bit sad about this. Sarah, because you're Australian, and Richard, because you've driven one of these people's cars for... how long did you have that Monaro for? Was it a year?
It was VXR8. It was... no, how long had I had it for? About 8 months. I think.
8 months.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the demise of Australia's last native car brand, Holden. Sarah, did you remember hearing about this? Did it make you sad?
It was on the front pages of the Australian newspapers. It's big news in Australia. In fact, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, was particularly upset as well. So obviously a lot of people will lose their jobs. To start with, it is an iconic Australian car brand. It started in 1948, and then Rust in Peace was the headline on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. So... yes, 1948 to 2020.
The brand Holden may have started in 1948, but as I recall reading, Mr. Holden emigrated to Australia in 1850-something from Walsall in the West Midlands. Noddy Holder from Slade comes from Walsall. So I'm just wondering if it's the same family, Holden and Holder. All right, Noddy Holden, it should be called. And initially they were a saddler, weren't they, in Australia, who became body makers or carriage makers. And they were a company called the Holden Body HBB, I think they called it HHB or something. They made bodies for other cars. And incredibly, and I didn't realise this until recently, Holden actually built cars for Ford in Australia before GM bought them. Isn't that shocking?
I think
Because they're
it's
great
just,
rivals, aren't they?
Rebody other people's chassis. It's funny because they're a bit of like an artificial car company, as much as GM just went, let's make them Australia's home car. But it was a job that they embraced with aplomb, and the very first Holden from the late 40s was in fact a rejected Chevrolet design that they just sort of sent down to Australia. So
Is that right?
Yes, they didn't have a sort of totally independent or glamorous start, but I was doing some reading up about those old Holden Commodores, which then led to
Hello,
the
Finn.
VXR8 Vauxhall that I had, which was really an HSV. It's a Commodore. But,
Yeah.
And up until the one that I had,
Was it actually based on what was the old Amiga chassis?
No, they used to be. The one I had wasn't.
Okay.
So the Commodore started in the 70s, and well, this is the thing. There's some good stories relating to these cars, and it's why you realise that Holden were, although they were forced to use a lot of parts from elsewhere, they were very much a company in their own right because the unique demands
Of Australia.
having a car in Australia
Yeah.
if you want to drive out into the outback, particularly before everyone had SUVs and sort of washboard roads. And when they said we were going to do a new saloon car in the 70s, and GM said, yeah, you can use these bits from Opel in Germany. We'll send over a prototype. And they took it to Holden's test track, Lang. And it lasted 1,500 kilometres before it was written off. And the Germans refused to believe that this was possible, and they asked for all the data readings from the stress gauges and stuff, and they were 300% higher than anything they'd seen in Germany. So they went, right, we're on the plane, we're coming over. You're using the equipment wrong. I'm going to find out what's going on here. We're bringing another prototype. And they brought another prototype. They went out to the Outback, did some real-world testing in the Outback. It split at the firewall. The car split in half.
Wow.
And then the Germans went, aha, I think we see the problem here. And they were authorised to beef up the shell. So the Commodore that came out, it looked a lot like an Opel, but underneath it was a lot beefier because it had to be, because Australia demands it. And that just went on. They also used the Opel interior, but it was made from different plastics because Holden themselves developed a different plastic compound that wouldn't go all gooey and stink in the hot sunshine.
Yeah.
Because they'd never considered that would be a thing when they're engineering it in Germany.
What is it your people do to cars, Sarah?
It's unbelievable. But the problem is now
they
everyone has SUVs, and it's kind of like, well, they're a little bit stronger, and I guess maybe the roads in Australia got a bit better. I mean, I know the Outback's still a big and brutal place, but there's less need for a saloon car to behave, in that way, that it can be strong enough to take the Outback. So,
have you ever done a massive road trip in Australia, Sarah, out into the Outback? Do you do that sort of thing?
Into the Outback? I have been into parts of the Outback. I've been to Broken Hill, where David Bowie recorded, that, and he was in the Outback.
The video for
Let's Dance.
Let's Dance, in that pub, we did for real.
I've actually been in that pub. I was there for a job, actually. So I've been to that part of the Outback, but really, to be honest, I've not had much of an opportunity to get into the...
You're a Melbourne girl, aren't you?
Sydney.
I'm sorry.
I have driven up and down the East Coast and things like that, but I'm not, a road tripper into the Outback where I see the rough and ready. Although, actually, there's up near Byron Bay and all around that area. I've driven all around there, and sort of as you come into the Highlands, there are some rough roads. So there you go.
But you're not going to be doing it in a Holden anymore. Did your dad or mum ever have a Holden growing up?
You know what? We never did, but there's a lot of families that only bought Holdens.
Yeah.
They were sold on Holdens. And actually, there's going to be a lot of people now that vintage Holdens are now all of a sudden probably going to increase in value, I would say.
Indeed, because of their scarcity.
I'm just reading here about a woman that's so obsessed with her Holden that she's told her family that they can take her to the cemetery in her Holden.
Oh.
She wants to
they're beholden to
die by the Holden.
Oh, bless her.
I was going to say one last great
Very
fact.
sad.
Because that's the thing, they had one last hurrah where finally Opel stopped making the Omega. Nothing for them to base Commodore on.
Yep.
GM finally gave them permission, about $1 billion budget, to do a bespoke car on their own. And that's the thing, and that was what became, over here we had it as the Vauxhall, the XR8, and there was something, it was a unique feeling car, nothing else felt like it, and it felt in a way sort of a product of its homeland, because it was kind of beefy and sturdy and a bit crude, but really great. And one thing I found out just reading up about Holden this week, because I was writing a column about them, and saying how sad it was that they've gone and Australia's lost something. I think that generation of Commodore, those later ones, that is the only large saloon car in the world that, as part of its development testing, was repeatedly driven into a crash test dummy of a kangaroo.
Really?
Is that right? A kangaroo?
In the same way that Volvo and Saab used to do this crash
Elks.
testing with elks.
Yeah.
Because if you hit an elk, you're in trouble. Well, you hit a kangaroo, they're big buggers and they weigh a lot, and it's something that Australians have
in
to...
Wales?
I'll tell you what, no word of a lie, I have hit a kangaroo on the road.
Of course you have.
It was awful.
Do they
I bet
write
it
your
was.
car off?
No, I was driving a little Holden Barina, actually.
A Barina,
Barina.
which was that's the Astra, isn't it? The Barina, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So, sorry to answer your question before. In fact, someone in my family has owned a Holden, that would be me. And it was years ago, in my early driving days, I was driving down the Wakehurst Parkway. So if anyone's been to the Northern Beaches in Australia, this Wakehurst Parkway, it's like bushland, huge on both sides. And it's sort of the main road as you go from the city into the Northern Beaches. And it was late at night and I was with one of my really good friends. And I just remember driving along, going, at pace. It would have been about 80, 90 kilometres an hour because that was the speed limit. And then all of a sudden, out from nowhere, I've just seen this big kangaroo bop along, like with his paws out. But in no notice, he literally must have just jumped in front of my car. And it was awful this experience because we actually drove over it and the whole car just went gong, gong, gong like this.
Oh, no.
And I was just like, oh my goodness. And then for the rest of the highway, me and my friend just Scooby-Doo screamed for about 5 minutes and just the shock of it. And then we caught up with our other friends. I think we were arriving at a party or something. And my other friend's like, didn't you call wildlife? Anyway, it was horrific. And I really hope that there wasn't a kangaroo lying on the side
Well,
of the
that's
road.
one of the reasons you have rhubards on cars over there.
And a Holden Barina.
Just like wipe the front off your car.
Yeah.
Or was it just a glancing blow?
It's a pretty
It went under
robust
the-
Holden. I think I could have got a dent. I'm not sure, but really, and it was not a small kangaroo. It was a decent sized kangaroo.
You poor thing. I'm glad you're still here.
I'm still here, but unfortunately, I'm not sure that the kangaroo is.
The story of the demise of Holden, I think, could be linked to a couple of things. First of all, in the last few years, the car that is called the Commodore, the Holden Commodore in Australia, instead of being based on what was the Omega chassis, the European Opel Vauxhall Omega chassis, was actually the Vauxhall Insignia. So it went from being a big, large 5-seater rear-wheel drive thing to being a medium-sized front-wheel drive thing, which just didn't suit the whole Commodore ethos, if you like. No wonder people moved away from it.
It's a bit of a rock and a hard place because that kind of big rear-wheel drive traditional car has got a fan base, but they won't go near
No, a front-wheel drive thing.
the Insignia.
Yeah.
But then the people who might have, they hoped, would go, oh, I see, it's more fuel efficient and it's smaller. They don't want to drive a Commodore because the Commodore sounds like, I think, as far as I can gather from talking to Aussies about it, it's like Commodore is a guy in a vest drinking VB or something like that and watching the Bathurst race, and it's a bit old school.
Yeah.
It's a bit...
We've moved on, perhaps.
Bogan, is that?
Bogan, that's the word, yes.
It's a bit... Is that really rude to say? I can never tell
Bogan?
how bad
Bogan.
is.
What's that mean?
It's a bit like calling someone a geezer.
Oh, right, a bogan.
But a bogan is,
So,
very-
sorry, Australian rules football shirt,
it could be
sort of
anything,
crop shirt.
varying either someone that has a few knocked out teeth, or they might have what they call a wife beater, singlet, tattoos.
Yeah.
Sleeveless AFL top, very tight. Could be the mullet. They could
It's
have
a bit
a
redneck,
mullet.
isn't it?
Yeah.
American,
a bit of redneck, or a bogan.
No wonder they won't
Someone
drive a front-drive
comes across
European car.
as a
yeah.
bogan, traditionally not a suit-wearing.
And the other thing I
Straight
reckon,
kind of-
which has probably affected it, is the sale of GM Europe, Vauxhall and Opel, to PSA. Because the chassis of at least 2, or in fact 3, Holdens, the Trax, which is the, what do we call the Trax over here? That sort of...
It's a mocker, is it?
It's a mocker, yeah. And the Astra, and what was the Commodore, which was based on the Insignia, now unavailable to them.
Those are GM's IP.
Yeah.
It's more that PSA are trying to get the hell out of those platforms as quickly as they can.
Yeah.
It's like the new course, very late in the programme, they pivoted
It's
to
based on
build
the Peugeot 205, 28.
And I think the Astras will be next to their shifting as quickly as they can. They've done it pretty quickly already to get as many cars in line with the box of bits that they brought along. So, yeah, the GM could have hauled it in and kept their IP and started making it somewhere else. But it's all just hassle, isn't it, for a relatively small car
Yeah,
market.
it's not a big market,
That's the
is
problem.
it?
There's just not enough people there buying enough cars to justify. I think it's amazing that for 50 odd years that Australia had essentially sort of bespoke cars.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, really, because you didn't get, like Ford Falcons and things like that, and those Holden Commodores that you see you
Don't
see them
sell
in the Middle
anywhere
East and
else.
things, but yeah, they don't really sell anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so there was almost like a quirk of the motor industry ecosystem that this could happen for so long. It is almost like Australia's wildlife, It's like there's nowhere else has koala bears.
Beat me to it.
Nowhere else has massive
Kangaroos.
rear-wheel drive saloons like that, and it's sort of hopefully the koalas are okay after the fires and things like that. I don't want the koalas to die out, but it was almost inevitable that the big saloons would die out because it just can't sustain the sales.
Holden, an example of sustainability. Gone. That's it. You've been listening to Gareth Jones on Speed. She was Sarah.
Goodbye.
And goodbye to Holden.
Goodbye, Holden.
We miss her. Genuinely, I'm not as emotionally connected to it as you are, but even I felt a pang when it was announced Holden were going. I'm sorry for your people and your proud heritage. Goodbye from Richard.
Goodbye.
And not quite goodbye from me, because we're going to leave you with a tune. And as this is the episode of Gareth Jones on Speed closest to St. David's Day, as befits the tradition here on Gareth Jones on Speed, here's a song with a Welsh theme. This one in the style of Goldie Looking Chain. Dydd Gwyl Dewi Da. Happy St. David's Day. See ya.
I love F1, it's a sport for me. If I had the cash, I'd be at a Grand Prix. They got gourmet burgers cooked in grease and a Newport favourite, chips and cheese. I got the perfect rim where I only paid $5. It's a scuba suit bought from a deep sea diver. So when it chucks you down in Silver Zone, I'll be a survivor. All we need now is a Welsh F1 driver. A Welsh F1 driver. Alright, but we need a Welsh F1 driver. We need a boy in the we'd probably bust the scales. He'd have a lovely helmet, shiny and red, and be hornier than James Hunt's Welshie. Great in bed. We wouldn't just sing the anthem at the end if our driver scored an ace. We'd drive you around the bend singing Hey Lad and Had I to a red in the face. It's all about winning like the Jeremy Eisteddfod sitting in first place. All through the race we are Welsh, we'd be singing all through the race. Saxons couldn't shout us down, no but enjoy it. 50,000 English versus 50 Welsh boys crying. Motorsport is dangerous, it says so on my ticket, but it's safer here than the slips at Lords on the bloody wicket. Yes, your balls are hard when you come from Splot, but it's a lethal game, cricket. Mind you, it's only half the price of a Silverstone F1 ticket. I've got no fear about carbon fibres hitting me in the head, cause I've been in a scrum in Pontypool and took a Swansea girl to bed. I'm telling you, this sport's safe for spectators. I know it's true. F1 cars don't kill people, crashes do. We've had a Welshman in F1 before, he was a North Walian fella. But the lad we got in mind this time like Senna, man, he's Stella. He's led a life of crime and he raps about crimes from a small South Wales favela. Not Brazil or the Caribbean, do man, that would be insane. He was brought up in Caerleon, a town with car in the name. But if a Welsh lad wins, you wouldn't see me hug him. I'd give him round the ear like I was his freaking mother. Then I'd thump him hard, even if he was my brother. I'm from South Wales, see, I'm a fighter, not a lover. I can't explain why he's so quick, he's fat, not athletic, but his speed is clearly unsurpassed, perhaps it is genetic. His dad drove a white man, not quite a genius. His mum is a musician, yes, his mother is a penis. He hasn't got a racing licence or a road one either, but bloody hell he's quick, but he drives for a reaver. Time flies by when you're the driver of a train, but puts a board in the pit lane, he'll be quick in the rain. Time flies by when you're the driver of a train, but puts a butt in the pit lane, you'll be quick in the rain. Time flies by when you're the driver of a train, but puts a butt in the pit lane, you'll be quick in the rain. Alright, I heard you the first time, innit? You knows it. It's true, innit? Mind you, it's a bit wet to go out in Newport. I know, should we stay in? You don't want to go out there on a winter's night like this. What do you mean night? It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's June.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site, follow us on Twitter, or to find out about sponsorship opportunities, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whizbang.
All we need now is a Welsh F1 driver. A Welsh F1 driver. Alright, but we need a Welsh F1 driver.
Gareth Jones on Speed!